Remember the 90s? Flannel shirts and dial-up internet and, that feeling that anything was possible.
Yeah.
But underneath all that, that optimistic surface,
Right.
something else was brewing. This wave of conspiracy theories that would really shape the way we think about truth and information today.
Yeah, it is fascinating how those seemingly carefree days were also kind of like a breeding ground for all this distrust and suspicion. I mean, you had the end of the Cold War, and it kind of left this void. And it felt like people were searching for these new enemies and these, new explanations for a world that just felt increasingly complex.
And that's what we're going to dive deep into today, right? We're going to trace the roots of some of these most pervasive conspiracy theories back to their origins in the 1990s.
Yeah.
And I think you might be surprised to learn just how much of our current landscape, the way we view authority, the way we consume information, can really be traced back to that decade.
It really is like a ripple effect,
Yeah.
What started as these whispers and like almost like a pre-internet age gained momentum with the rise of talk radio and then like exploded online, creating this parallel universe of information where facts are fluid and truth is subjective.
And to guide us through this fascinating and often unsettling terrain, we have an expert who spent years researching and reporting on conspiracy theories and their impact. Welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So let's start with a story. This is a story that, for many, marked the beginning of this descent into the world of conspiracy. The year is 1993, Fort Marcy Park, just outside Washington, D.C., and the victim is Vince Foster, a lawyer and close friend of President Bill Clinton.
Yeah, Foster's death, officially ruled a suicide, was immediately just shrouded in this controversy. There were inconsistencies in the initial investigations, conflicting reports about the presence of a gun at the scene, and just these whispers that something just didn't add up.
And those whispers quickly amplified into a roar, fueled by, I think, a growing distrust of the Clintons and this, media ecosystem that was just eager for scandal.
Yeah, exactly. This was just the perfect storm for a conspiracy theory to take root. You had a high-profile death, a lack of clear answers, and this powerful couple already facing accusations of corruption and cover-ups.
And this wasn't just any conspiracy theory. This was the birth of the Clinton body count, a narrative that would haunt the Clintons for decades and become a touchstone for future conspiracy theorists.
Yeah, so the Clinton body count theory, essentially, it posits that the Clintons were involved in a string of these suspicious deaths, and they were using their power to just silence anyone who threatened their ambitions. It's a chilling narrative, and one that, despite this lack of credible evidence, still continues to circulate online today.
It's amazing how a single event, amplified by all these factors, this confluence of factors, can really become the foundation for such a pervasive and enduring belief system.
And what's particularly interesting, I think, about the Vince Foster case is how it kind of intercepted with the rise of new media technologies. This was the early days of the internet, and all these online forums and chat rooms became like breeding grounds for these theories to spread, completely bypassing the traditional media gatekeepers.
So you're saying even back then we were seeing the emergence of what we now call echo chambers, these online spaces where people just reinforce each other's beliefs, regardless of evidence or logic.
Precisely. One White House staffer at the time described stumbling upon an online chat room that was dedicated to the Clinton body count and realized this seismic shift that was happening in how information was being created and shared.
It must have been such a shock to realize that the narrative being crafted online was so disconnected from the reality that they were experiencing in the White House.
Absolutely. It was a wake-up call, I think, to the power of the internet to shape public perception, for better or for worse. And in the case of the Clintons, it was often for worse.
But why the Clintons? Why did they become such a focal point for all these conspiracy theories?
That's a crucial question, and I think there are several factors at play here. First, you have Hillary Clinton, a powerful woman in a role that traditionally hadn't been, so politically active. Her ambition, her intelligence, her outspokenness, all these things challenge these traditional gender roles, and for some, threaten the established order.
And then you have Bill Clinton, who was obviously a very charismatic figure, but also one who was embroiled in a series of scandals, from Whitewater to Monica Lewinsky.
Yeah, the scandals, regardless of their, veracity, provided more fuel for the fire. They fed into this narrative of power and corruption. It further cemented the image of the Clintons as a couple willing to do anything to hold on to power.
So it was a combination of factors: political ambition, gender dynamics, and just the allure of scandal.
Exactly. And all of this was playing out against a backdrop of, I think, social and political anxieties. The Cold War had ended, the world was changing rapidly, and people were looking for someone to blame, someone to explain the unsettling shifts that they were experiencing.
And the Clintons, with their complex history and their prominent position on the world stage, just became these perfect scapegoats.
It's like a Shakespearean drama unfolding in the digital age. You have ambition, betrayal, power struggles, and this chorus of voices amplifying the narrative, twisting the truth, and just blurring the lines between fact and fiction.
And this was just the beginning. I mean, these seeds of distrust sown in the 1990s would grow into a forest of conspiracy theories, branching out in unexpected directions and really shaping the political landscape for decades to come.
And the internet, once this promising tool for connection and enlightenment, would become this weaponized platform for spreading misinformation and manipulating public opinion.
But before we delve further into that digital rabbit hole, let's take a closer look at some of the key players who really shaped the narrative in those early days. One name that stands out is Cliff Jackson.
Ah, Cliff Jackson. He was a fascinating character. He was a friend-turned-foe of Bill Clinton's, and he played a really pivotal role in fueling the conspiracy theories that were surrounding the Clintons.
What was his motivation? I mean, was it purely personal animosity, or was there something more at play?
Well, it's a complex question. Jackson was undoubtedly driven by a sense of betrayal. He claimed that Clinton had wronged him both personally and professionally.
So there was a personal vendetta at play.
It seems so, but Jackson's actions went, I think, beyond mere revenge. He became the source of information, some true, some embellished, for reporters who were, eager to dig up dirt on the Clintons.
And this was all happening alongside the Vince Foster conspiracy theories, the growing distrust of the Clintons, and this well-funded effort to discredit them, known as the Arkansas Project.
Right. The Arkansas Project was this concerted effort bankrolled by Richard Mellon Scaife, a very wealthy heir with a deep disdain for the Clintons, to just uncover any scandal, any whiff of impropriety that could be used to damage their reputation.
So it was a coordinated smear campaign, basically using the media as a weapon.
In essence, yes. They funded investigations, hired private detectives, and fed stories to reporters, all with the goal of bringing down the Clintons.
And this was all happening before the internet really took off. It's incredible how much damage can be done through traditional media channels even back then.
Absolutely. And this is where the story takes another fascinating turn. Remember, this was the era of VHS tapes. And somebody had this, bright idea of compiling all of these stories, these allegations and innuendos about the Clintons, into a single pseudo-documentary.
So it was like a pre-internet version of a viral video,
Okay.
except instead of YouTube, it was being circulated on VHS tapes.
You got it. And this VHS tape, with its grainy footage and its sensationalized claims, made its way into living rooms across the country, further solidifying the image of the Clintons as corrupt and dangerous.
It's fascinating how these narratives took shape outside of the mainstream media, really leveraging new technologies and exploiting the public's thirst for scandal.
And it highlights the power of storytelling, the way a well-crafted narrative, even if it's based on, flimsy evidence or outright fabrications, can capture the imagination and shape public opinion.
So we've gone from a tragic death in Fort Marcy Park to a coordinated smear campaign to a VHS tape spreading conspiracy theories across the country. It's a chilling reminder of how vulnerable we are to misinformation, even before the internet amplified these trends.
And it really sets the stage for the even more complex and unsettling landscape that we face today, where the lines between reality and fiction have just become increasingly blurred.
But before we jump ahead to the present day, let's delve a little deeper into the psychology of belief. Why are people so drawn to these narratives, even when they defy logic and evidence?
That's a question that has fascinated psychologists and sociologists for decades, and there's no single answer, of course.
But there must be some common threads, some underlying motivations that drive people toward these alternative explanations for the world.
Absolutely. One factor is our innate desire to find patterns and make sense of the world around us. Our brains are wired to connect the dots, even when those connections are tenuous or non-existent.
So we're hardwired to be conspiracy theorists.
Not exactly, but we are predisposed to seek explanations, especially for events that are confusing, frightening, or seemingly random.
And in a world that just feels increasingly complex and unpredictable, it's understandable that people would crave simple explanations, even if those explanations are based on faulty logic or manufactured evidence.
That's right. Conspiracy theories offer a sense of order in a world that can feel chaotic and overwhelming. They provide a scapegoat, someone to blame, a way to make sense of the senseless.
And the internet, With its endless supply of information and misinformation, just provides the perfect platform for these narratives to spread and evolve.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword. The internet has democratized information, but it's also created these echo chambers where people can isolate themselves from dissenting voices and just reinforce their own biases.
And this brings us to a figure who I think embodies both the allure and the danger of online conspiracy theories, Jacob Chansley, better known as a QAnon shaman.
Jansley's journey from a protest in Phoenix shortly after the 2020 election to the steps of the Capitol on January 6th, I think, reveals a lot about why people are drawn to these
He
narratives.
was such a striking figure with his face paint and his horned headdress. I mean, it's hard to imagine what was going through his mind as he stormed the Capitol with that mob of, fellow believers.
Chansley was, in many ways, a lost soul searching for answers in a chaotic world. And the internet, with its endless rabbit holes of information and misinformation, provided a space where he could find those answers, or at least the answers he was looking for.
He was doing his own research, as they say.
Exactly. And this is where the double-edged sword of the internet comes into play. While it can be an incredible tool for learning and connecting, it can also be this breeding ground for confirmation bias. You can find information that supports any belief, no matter how outlandish, creating these echo chambers where dissenting voices are silenced and critical thinking is replaced with blind faith.
So, in a way, Chansley was a victim of his own search for truth. He went down the wrong rabbit hole and got lost in a labyrinth of misinformation.
It's a complex situation. On the one hand, you have to, I think, acknowledge the individual's responsibility to be discerning and critical. On the other hand, you have to recognize the power of these online platforms to manipulate and exploit our vulnerabilities.
It's a reminder that we're all susceptible to these seductive narratives, especially when they tap into our fears and anxieties.
That's right. And it underscores the importance of critical thinking skills and media literacy in navigating this increasingly complex information landscape.
We've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
We've explored the origins of the Clinton body count, the rise of Cliff Jackson, the insidiousness of the Arkansas Project, and the emergence of these online echo chambers. It's a lot to process, but I think it's essential to understand this historical context if we want to make sense of the current wave of conspiracy theories that is sweeping the globe.
I agree. And as we move forward in our discussion, I think it's important to keep in mind that these narratives, while they're often bizarre and unsettling, they're not just, harmless entertainment.
They have real-world consequences. They're shaping political discourse, fueling social divisions, and sometimes even inciting violence.
That's right. And as we've seen with the rise of QAnon and these other online movements, the stakes are higher than ever before.
So, what can we do? How do we protect ourselves from these seductive narratives? How do we cultivate a more informed and resilient society in the face of this onslaught of misinformation?
Those are the questions we'll be exploring in the next part of our deep dive. We'll delve into the psychology of belief, the role of social media, and some of the strategies that we can use to counter the spread of conspiracy theories.
Well, I'm looking forward to that conversation.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I really encourage our listeners to reflect on their own experiences with conspiracy theories.
Yeah. Have you ever found yourself, drawn to a narrative that defied logic or evidence? What were the underlying anxieties that fueled your belief? And what steps did you take to maybe challenge those beliefs and seek a more balanced perspective?
I think those are tough questions, but they're essential to ask if we really want to break free from the grip of misinformation and build a more informed and resilient society.
We'll be back soon to continue our exploration. In the meantime, stay curious, stay critical, and stay engaged. We've talked a lot about the Clintons and how they became such a focal point for these conspiracy theories in the 90s.
Yeah,
But they weren't the only ones.
that's right. It's like that era was like a breeding ground for all sorts of alternative narratives. Like what else was kind of bubbling up during that time?
Well, one theory that gained a lot of traction in the 90s was this idea of a new world order.
Right.
This shadowy group of elites that were, controlling global events.
Oh, yeah, I remember hearing about that. Secret societies pulling the strings from behind the scenes.
Yeah.
It all felt very cloak and dagger.
Exactly. And this theory, it really tapped into this deep-seated fear of a loss of autonomy.
Right.
The idea that our lives were being controlled by forces beyond our understanding.
And I think those fears were really amplified by, all the rapid changes that were happening in the world at that time.
Yeah.
The fall of the Soviet Union, globalization, the rise of the internet. It really felt like the ground was shifting beneath our feet.
Absolutely. And in times of uncertainty, people often seek simple explanations, even if those explanations are based on faulty logic or, outright fabrications.
So the New World Order theory provided like a convenient scapegoat for all the anxieties of that era.
You could say that. It gave people a sense of control in a world that felt increasingly out of control. It provided a target for their anger and frustration.
And this theory wasn't just confined to the fringes of society, right? It found its way into like
Yeah.
popular culture, books, movies, even music.
That's right. Think about, movies like Conspiracy Theory with Mel Gibson
Right.
or, the X-Files TV series. They really tapped into this zeitgeist, this sense that something sinister was lurking beneath the surface.
It's fascinating how these ideas can like seep into the mainstream
Yeah.
and shape our perceptions of reality, even if we don't consciously subscribe to them.
It's a subtle but powerful influence, and it speaks to the importance of media literacy, I think, being able to critically analyze the information that we consume and separate fact from fiction.
So we've got this perfect storm brewing, right?
Yeah.
Distrust of authority, a rapidly evolving media landscape, and this hunger for simple explanations in a complex world. And then the internet comes along and just throws gasoline on the fire.
Precisely. The internet was a game changer. It connected people who might never have met in real life, creating these online communities where these alternative narratives could really flourish.
It's like the internet created a parallel universe where conspiracy theories could evolve and mutate at like an unprecedented pace.
Exactly. And as these theories spread online, they became more sophisticated, more interconnected. They start to cross-pollinate, borrowing elements from each other, creating this vast and intricate web of belief.
So it's not just like isolated pockets of belief anymore. It's a whole interconnected ecosystem of misinformation.
That's right. And it's an ecosystem that's constantly evolving, adapting to new events and new information.
It's a bit overwhelming to think about, honestly. Like, where do we even begin to unravel this web of belief?
Well, I think the first step is recognizing that conspiracy theories, they're not just about a lack of information or critical thinking skills.
There's something deeper going on.
Absolutely. Conspiracy theories often tap into, deep-seated psychological needs. They provide a sense of meaning and purpose in a world that can feel random and chaotic.
They offer a sense of belonging to, like, a community of like-minded individuals who believe they have access to these hidden truths.
Exactly. And they provide a sense of agency, this feeling that you are fighting against powerful forces, even if those forces are largely imagined.
So it's not just about, like, debunking specific theories with facts and logic.
Right. We have to understand the underlying anxieties, the search for meaning, this need to feel in control that really drives people towards these narratives.
It's about addressing the human needs that these theories exploit.
Precisely. And that's a much more complex challenge than simply fact-checking or presenting alternative evidence.
So how do we approach this challenge? How do we foster a more resilient society that's less susceptible to these seductive narratives?
Well, one key strategy is promoting media literacy, teaching people how to critically evaluate information sources.
That makes sense. We need to equip people with the tools to discern fact from fiction, especially in the online world where information overload is, like, rampant.
Absolutely. We need to teach people how to identify bias, how to spot fake news, how to assess the credibility of sources.
And it's not just about being skeptical of everything you read online, right?
Yeah.
It's also about being aware of your own biases.
That's right. We all have preconceived notions and beliefs that can influence how we interpret information. The key is to be aware of those biases and to be willing to challenge them.
It's about being open to different perspectives, even if they make us uncomfortable.
Exactly. It's about cultivating intellectual humility, recognizing that we don't have all the answers and that we can learn from others, even those who disagree with us.
That sounds like a tall order in our current climate, where polarization and division seem to be, like, the norm.
It is a challenge, but I believe it's an essential one. If we want to create a more informed and resilient society, we need to foster this culture of respectful dialogue and critical thinking.
So it's not just about individual responsibility. It's also about creating a social and political environment where these kinds of conversations can flourish.
Absolutely. We need to create spaces where people feel safe to express their doubts, to ask questions, to challenge the prevailing narratives.
We need to create a culture where it's okay to be wrong, where intellectual curiosity is valued more than, ideological purity.
That's a great way to put it. And it's something that we can all contribute to in our own way.
So it's not just about experts or academics or journalists. It's about all of us taking responsibility for the information we consume and the conversations that we engage in.
That's right. We all have a role to play in shaping a more informed and resilient society.
This has been a fascinating discussion. I'm starting to see conspiracy theories in a new light, not just as bizarre beliefs, but as symptoms of, deeper societal anxieties and psychological needs.
I think that's a valuable insight.
Yeah.
And it's a reminder that if we want to address the problem of misinformation, we need to go beyond simply debunking specific theories.
We need to address the underlying conditions that make people susceptible to these narratives in the first place.
Exactly. And that requires a multifaceted approach that involves education, critical thinking, media literacy, and a commitment to creating a more just and equitable society.
It's a daunting task,
Yeah.
but one that I believe is essential for the health of our democracy and the well-being of our society.
I couldn't agree more. The stakes are high, but I believe we have the capacity to create a better future. A future where truth matters, where critical thinking prevails, and where we are all empowered to navigate the complex information landscape with discernment and resilience.
Well said. Before we wrap up, I'm curious to know what you think the future holds for conspiracy theories. Will they continue to thrive in the digital age, or is there hope that we can collectively develop a stronger immunity to their allure?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And honestly, I don't have a crystal ball. But I do believe that the outcome depends on the choices we make as individuals and as a society.
So it's not a foregone conclusion. We have the power to shape the future.
Absolutely. The future of misinformation is not predetermined. It's a battle that's being fought every day in classrooms, newsrooms, social media platforms, living rooms, and in the minds of individuals.
So it's a battle that's being fought on multiple fronts.
That's right. And it's a battle that requires a multi-pronged approach. We need to invest in education, media literacy, critical thinking skills. We need to create a social and political environment that values truth and accountability. And we need to empower individuals to be discerning consumers of information and active participants in the fight against misinformation.
It sounds like a daunting task, but also an inspiring one.
It is, but I believe it's a fight worth having. The future of our democracy, and perhaps even our civilization, depends on our ability to discern truth from falsehood, to resist the allure of easy answers and scapegoats, and to build a world where critical thinking and reasoned discourse prevail.
It's interesting. We've been spending all this time talking about conspiracy theories that originated in the 90s,
Right.
but they definitely didn't stay there.
No, they haven't.
They kind of evolved and adapted to the digital age.
Yeah,
They found all these new ways to spread and thrive in the online world.
they have. It's like a virus. They mutate and become more contagious.
That's a really good analogy, actually. And I think one of the most striking examples of this evolution is the rise of QAnon.
Oh, absolutely.
Now, QAnon, that's the one with the cryptic messages and the belief in a deep state cabal, right?
Exactly. QAnon emerged on the fringes of the internet back in 2017, but it really gained traction quickly.
They did.
It spread from those obscure message boards to, mainstream social media platforms.
So what was it about QAnon that resonated with so many people?
Well, it tapped into a lot of the same anxieties and fears that we've already been talking about, this distrust of authority, a sense of powerlessness, that craving for simple explanations in this incredibly complex world.
Right, but QAnon took things to a whole new level, though, right? I mean, with this elaborate mythology and these apocalyptic predictions.
That's right. QAnon wove together this tapestry of existing conspiracy theories from the Illuminati to the New World Order, creating this grand narrative of good versus evil.
Right.
And at the center of this narrative was the figure of Q, a supposed high-level government insider with access to this classified information. And Q's cryptic messages, known as Q drops, provided followers with this sense of belonging to this exclusive group with access to, hidden truths.
It's like this giant puzzle that followers were invited to solve, you know? Piecing together clues and decoding messages to uncover the supposed truth.
Exactly. And that sense of participation, that feeling of being part of this collective effort to expose the truth,
Yeah.
it was incredibly seductive.
Yeah. I could see how that would be. It gave followers this sense of agency and purpose in a world that often feels, chaotic and meaningless.
Exactly. And QAnon also tapped into this deep-seated yearning for a savior figure, someone who'd come along and, expose the corruption and restore order to the world.
And that savior figure was none other than Donald Trump.
According to QAnon, yeah, Trump was secretly working to dismantle this deep state cabal and bring about this great awakening.
I mean, it's incredible how QAnon managed to, like, weave Trump into its mythology, turning him into this messianic figure.
Yeah, it was a stroke of propaganda, really, and it shows how these conspiracy theories can exploit these existing political divisions and loyalties.
And QAnon didn't just stay online either, right? It spilled over into the real world, inspiring rallies, protests, and even acts of violence.
That's right. The most dramatic example, of course, was the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, where QAnon followers were among those who stormed the building.
It was a chilling reminder of the real-world consequences of these online narratives.
Absolutely. QAnon may have started as this fringe theory, but it has morphed into this dangerous movement with the potential to, undermine democracy and incite violence.
So where do we go from here? How do we combat the spread of QAnon and these other, harmful conspiracy theories?
Well, one key strategy is to address those underlying conditions that make people susceptible to these narratives.
Right, and we've talked about this before. This need for meaning and purpose, the fear of powerlessness, the desire for these simple explanations.
Exactly. We need to create a society where people feel connected, supported, and empowered.
Right, a society where they don't feel the need to, like, seek solace in these alternative realities.
That's right. And we also need to promote media literacy and critical thinking skills.
Right, teach people how to evaluate information sources, identify bias, spot misinformation.
Exactly. We need to equip people with the tools to, navigate this incredibly complex information landscape with discernment and resilience.
And we need to do all of this while, upholding the principles of free speech and open debate.
That's right. We can't, censor our way out of this problem. We need to engage in respectful dialogue and challenge these false narratives with facts and evidence.
It's a daunting task, but I believe it's one that we must undertake if we want to preserve our democracy and safeguard our future.
I agree. The stakes are high, but I believe that by working together, we can create a more informed and resilient society, one that is less susceptible to the seductive narratives of conspiracy.
Well, this has been a truly eye-opening deep dive into the world of conspiracy theories, from their origins in the 90s to their evolution in the digital age. I mean, we've explored the psychology of belief, the role of social media, the dangers of echo chambers, and, the real-world consequences of misinformation.
It has been a journey.
It's been sobering, but also empowering in a way.
I think that's a good way to put it. We need to be aware of the dangers, but we also need to be hopeful that we can overcome them.
So as we wrap up our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a call to action.
What can we do to be part of the solution?
First, be critical of the information that you consume. Don't just believe everything you read or hear. Check sources, look for evidence, and be wary of emotionally charged language or sensationalized headlines.
Good advice.
Second, engage in respectful dialogue with those who hold different viewpoints. Try to understand where they're coming from and challenge their beliefs with facts and logic. But do so with empathy and compassion.
I like that.
And third, support organizations that are working to combat misinformation and promote media literacy. I mean, there's so many great groups out there doing really important work.
They are. And finally, be an advocate for truth and accountability in your own communities. Speak up when you encounter misinformation and challenge those who are spreading it.
That's how we change things.
Because it's up to all of us to create a more informed and resilient society. That's it for this episode of The Deep Dive. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time for another fascinating exploration of the world around us.
Take care.